Hey, thanks for joining in for this first episode of Star Citizen Retrospective. You can call me Space Tomato. This is going to be the first of my series of Tomato Talks, which I hope will help some people learn more about Star Citizen. Now, what I'd like to do with this retrospective series is take a look at the big features we were covering a year ago and see where they are today, whether they are above and beyond or they've completely missed the mark. I think it's good to maintain some perspective in terms of the progress we are making or the lack thereof. This is something I want to try and cover every 2 weeks, and I'm not going to be going over every single thing that's talked about, but I am going to be taking a look at all the biggest features that are discussed. So without dragging this intro on too long, let's get started. On June 18th of 2018, we had a Calling All Devs episode which focused on in-game ship rentals and purchases, as well as insurance timers. The first question I'm covering was regarding the possibility of purchasing ships in Alpha 3.2 or 3.3. Todd Pappy gave us the answer that the team is working on getting this possibility into the game for 3.3, which they did complete. Since 3.3, we've been able to purchase ships in-game. The catalog has not been large, and it is being expanded in this upcoming patch of 3.6, but purchases were there and are now available via kiosk. Rentals still are not in-game, however they are currently scheduled to be released in a delayed state in a 3.6.x patch, hopefully within the next couple of months. Personally, I'm very excited for ship rentals. I do not grind that much to make money, so the cheaper prices are going to be much more interesting to me. I'm hoping to be able to fly more ships and try more things out. Now, there were a couple other questions in this episode of Calling All Devs, but none of them really pertain to the main focus of this video, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Jumping forward to an episode of Around the Verse on June 21st, we got to see our first implementations of Planetary Mining. We got to hear some of the sound effects, see how it worked, the spread of the rocks. Not bad. It wasn't bad at all for our first implementation. Since then, we've seen some improvements. We've seen added animations, we've seen changes in the UI as well as controls. We've also heard changed sound effects. Extraction mode on. Besides these little improvements, we really haven't seen any big developmental leaps when it comes to mining since 3.2. We haven't seen anything that has to do with the Orion, which is our large mining ships, and we also don't know anything about refineries or refining minerals. There are improvements coming in 3.6 regarding the returns of UEC you'll get for mined minerals versus purchased minerals, but besides that, mining's on the back burner, so we haven't seen much improvement. That is to be expected, as most of the gameplay loops, including salvage and exploration and repair, have been pushed back on the roadmap again and again to make room, supposedly, for more development in the networking and AI aspects, as well as for Squadron 42. So we haven't really been expecting much production in those areas, but it's not a great feeling to not see it. Next up in that episode of Around the Verse, we got to see some of the weather effects and how the wind would be affecting the trees on Hurston. Not much has been done with that since then. It's still pretty much the same as when it was implemented, but I'm looking forward to seeing some of the updated weather patterns, hopefully for Microtech and most definitely for Crusader with the Cloud Tech coming online. That being said, we got to see some impressive windstorms in the Homestead CitizenCon demo, and I'm hoping that we get to see more of that soon enough. After that, we got a quick look at the group system, which made it easier for us to link up with each other in the verse. The group system has seen quite a few improvements over this last year, including increases in size, stability, and UI improvements, as well as quantum linking. One of my favorite improvements to the system was the ability for anybody in your group to access your ship while still maintaining the locks to anybody who's outside of your group. This made it a lot harder for people to steal your ship on Port Olisar. And while they might not be the big changes that we were hoping for in the group system, 3.6 does seem to be adding some quality of life improvements, including making separate comm channels and being able to name them, seeing who's speaking on any given comm channel, and getting ship-wide comms for any ship that you might be in, which is especially nice for the 890 jump big boy who's joining the game in a couple of months. Wrapping up around the verse, we get to move forward into Calling All Devs, June 25th of 2018. The very first question right off the bat is pertaining to attachments for FPS weapons. That which is actually quite contextually important right now, as we're seeing some development in that in Alpha 3.6. Now, at the time, weapon attachments was being delayed. According to Nicholas Monk, the delay was because the system was implemented. However, the assets, the scopes, the stocks, the barrels, there were no in-game capabilities for players to equip these things. So while developers could create the tie-ins for these assets, the assets simply could not be equipped yet. Now the question was also expanded for ship components, which had the opposite problem. All of the assets were already created. The devs knew that ship components were going to be made to be customizable and swappable since 3.0. However, the system wasn't ready to handle those assets yet, so that simply wasn't implemented, and we still don't see that possibility in the game yet. I had actually expected to see swappable components in the Terrabin already at this point, but it's still not here. So as of 3.6, weapon attachments have actually seen a big improvement. However, ship components, while they've seen additions of heat and damage and degradation, are still not customizable or swappable in person. You can swap these components out via the vehicle tab on your mobiGlass or while you're purchasing these components at the store. But as far as actually picking them up and taking them out of the ship, you can't do that. Sorry. Can't steal the power plant of that Caterpillar. Although I think the Caterpillar's power plant is too big, so don't try it anyways. Now, the next question that was asked on this episode of Calling All Devs had to do with the difference between griefing and pirating. While griefing is a big problem in MMOs, and this is a distinction that's usually hard to make in MMOs, piracy is a very big part of Star Citizen, so they needed to have the systems in place to make it a viable gameplay option. Dan Truffin was confident that they will have the loss system that they need to make this a possibility. However, we haven't seen much besides defensive turrets or security guards at Hurston until 3.6.
What am I most excited about 3.6? Frickin' loss systems, bro.
With 3.6, we're getting special locations where you can buy and sell materials on the black market, allowing for better gameplay surrounding illegal items and drugs. We're also getting the first implementation of a law system, which should mark the beginning of the end of people simply ramming your ship on the Port Olisar landing pads or shooting you for no reason with no repercussions. This first implementation of the law system is going to help set up jurisdictions for separate securities, as well as splitting the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony, so that a parking violation isn't going to get you killed like a homicide might. They mentioned this first almost a year ago to the date in Calling All Devs, and now we're finally seeing it in game. Moving on to a special Squadron 42 episode of Around the Verse on June 28th, we start off with a look at animations. Player animations are supposed to now be driven by entity rather than animation, meaning that when you stop moving, your character stops moving. This is something that you can see in the live game right now. We then saw player interactions with objects around the game, such as books, bottles, and guns. This is something that was shown off at CitizenCon and then implemented into Alpha 3.4. We then saw animations and player carryables, which they've been speaking about improving. We haven't seen that yet, but we do have an update coming in 3.6 that may touch on this. After animations, we took a look at prototyping soft body deformation. This was using standard wall assets and breaking them up to rig them for soft body animations and combining that with the GM cache LM big method in order to use less memory. I expect to see this in Squadron 42 before Star Citizen, which is why it showed up in this Around the Verse. As we have not seen it in the PU, I don't expect to see it anytime soon, but it's something to be excited about. From there, we checked in with the props team, who showed off some of the work being done on Hurston's upcoming biomes. A lot of this work was being done in ZBrush and distributed procedurally around the PU. These are things that we can see in every update, whether it's Hurston or RCorp, a new space station. We'll see it in Microtech upcoming as well, so you can always expect to see work in the props department going on. Last but certainly not least in this update, we had a special episode of Reverse the Verse Live with Chris Roberts, where he talked about 3.6 and some things that he had envisioned for future updates, which is pretty important in this series. Many of you know that the UI in this game needs some work. One of Chris's first statements here was that he wanted to bring some unity between the different modes, including the standard heads up, scanning, or mining. He also wanted to reinforce the idea that they do listen to the community in making changes to things we have problems with. We've seen this with things like the flight model and VTOL, as well as the 890 jump taking design cues from the 600. We also, just a couple days ago, heard that things might be changing for something people have had some problems with, so keep an eye out. It sounds like he's sticking to that promise. We've seen things like the survey at the beginning of last year that asked us what kind of features we wanted to be implemented, as well as ship surveys to ask us what ships we want next. They do listen to the community, but sometimes it can take up to 6 months to see things get switched around because things are planned so far in advance. And we do see quite a few delays when it comes to AI, with no updates coming in 3.6. We haven't seen much over the last year that convinces me that the AI is looking good. There are plenty of job openings on the website that we hope get filled, but for now AI is a little slow developing. So let's hope for more of that in the next year. After that, they talked a bit about how Around the Verse was going to be in flux for a while. And it took a little while, but they finally got inside Star Citizen, the successor to Around the Verse, to somewhere where I think the majority of the community is happy. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Go ahead and leave a comment and tell me what you think of the new show. Chris then had to answer a difficult question regarding Star Citizen, which is how are they going to get all these systems created with how slow the first one's developing? Of course, most of us have heard the answers to this over the years, but to reiterate, these are tools that are being developed as they build each moon, planet, and system. So as they grow and mature, they hopefully will be able to create every planet even faster. Just last September, they wanted to create all 4 of Hurston's moons within 1 month, and they did complete that goal. So it won't be entirely obvious until maybe next year whether this is working, and while Chris said that he thought we would notice in 2019, I think it's going to take a little longer. So hopefully it does work out. We'll see. Finally, Chris answered a question about companion AI ships, stating that they might be implemented in 2019. We still haven't seen them halfway through the year, but it's pretty important for Squadron 42, so I would be surprised if we didn't see them within the next 12 months. There is an update due for flight AI improvements and polishing in Q1 of 2020, so that may be the golden ticket. We'll just have to wait and see. And that just about wraps it up for this first Star Citizen retrospective. Thanks for joining me on this one. I really think it's a good idea to take a look back and just keep track of what kind of progress we're seeing over the year. It's easy to forget those little things. There's just so much development, it's easy for things to get lost and for us to forget about things that we thought we were going to get last year and we still haven't seen, or things that we got and we were not even expecting. I hope to continue this video series and improve it over time, whether that means getting new equipment like a better microphone or adding new features and new footage, so stick with me and maybe you'll see something new. As always, I'd like to thank everybody again for joining me, and if you liked this, please subscribe to see the latest up-to-date video I have. I'll be posting this every 2 weeks, and I hope to see you with the next one. Thanks!